Hi, my name is Candice Jarrett. Welcome back to the Business Pulse podcast. Today we have Stuart Ervin, who is the president of Racket Management.
This is the Business Pulse podcast, where you'll discover strategies, tools, and stories to inspire success through conversations with leading business owners, startup founders, and venture capitalists. Our aim is your success. Presented by XKOVA, a next-generation payment processor to help your business thrive. Visit us at xkova.com.
Hi, Stuart. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Candice, thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want to jump into your business, but first, I want to say that earlier today, I saw a post that you had put out on LinkedIn about how a penny almost ruined your life. And I thought that was such a brilliant post. Would you mind sharing that story to get us started?
Yeah, no problem. So when I was younger, in my mid-20s, my first real business was I was flipping houses, I was doing real estate investing. Now, I started a business when I was 16, but I still was kind of doing part corporate, part self-employment, right? So anyhow, when I first started my business, the real estate business, I really kind of took off and really thought, man, I had made it. And that was when flipping houses was all on TV and everything, and I had bought a new truck, new trailer. I, in my mind, was living, as they say in the South, high on the hog, right? So I can remember walking through a parking lot with my mom, and I stepped over a penny or something, and she said, "Aren't you going to pick that penny up?" And I just said, "Nah, I'm good," and just kept walking and got my truck and left. Fast forward about 18 months or so later, things had dramatically changed, not only in my business. I had not managed my cash flow well, and I was actually growing quicker than I probably should, than my cash could allow. The things had changed. This is 2007, 8, 9 timeframe, 2010. Things in the market had changed, and so my business was starting to slow, and I ran out of cash. And I had to call my mom to make payroll and say, "Mom, I need to borrow some money because I ran out of cash." Obviously, she paid me. We made payroll. Everything was good. We were able to rebound and everything was able to recover, but I don't know how long, maybe a year or so later, I was talking with my wife about, my God, it was crazy how we had fought through all that stuff. And she said, "Yeah, your mom had talked to me about when she had to bail you out." And she made the comment sarcastically, "I bet you he never steps over a penny again." And that was a very hard lesson. My mom's never told me that. I don't know that my mom even knows that I was told that. But anyhow, yeah, that was a very hard lesson to learn, to never take anything for granted and to really watch your stuff, because that stupid little penny, I think, taught me a valuable lesson.
I thought that was such a brilliant story. Thank you so much for sharing it
No
with
problem.
the audience. So 16.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you started that early. So you've had the entrepreneurial spirit since you were really young.
Yeah. So I've always just known I've wanted to do business since I was like 13. The kicker is I didn't necessarily know exactly what that looked like. And so my dad started a business when I was about 14, which gave me the opportunity to start at the bottom and work my way all the way to the top. Well, in that time frame, again, I was 16. Some of his customers were saying, "Hey, I can't get," so it was a fencing company, right? A wholesale fencing company. So he would make the fence styles and sell it to fence companies and contractors who would then do it to do the installations for the end use customer. They were saying, "Hey, it was the summer. We're running out of heads. We don't have enough people to do our installation." My dad's like, "Well, I got two sons. They've been working, doing the assembly. I'm sure they can do the installation as well." And so I started with my younger brother at 16. The first summer, we were more or less subs for the fence companies, but I kind of really learned the game. And then we started our own deal where we actually were selling to the end use customers as well. And I ran that business for probably 15 years on the side. I never really put all my focus on it, but it was full blown at 16.
So after real estate, what happened with that?
Yeah. So
what was the next step in your journey?
Yeah, so I actually had to go back to corporate America, which was okay. I'm perfectly content really working in both sides. But all my eggs were in the real estate basket. So I had a fence company that was making a little bit of cash. I had a remodeling business just because I was already in the areas, kind of flipping the houses, so that the neighbors would come and say, "Hey, I got this, that, and the other that I want to do." But all my eggs really were in the real estate investing basket. And so when that dried up, I went back into corporate America. And so the reality is, bracket management was the business I have today, started in 2009, because again, I had those three small companies. I had a college buddy of mine who had two small companies they really were not large enough to have much of an overhead structure. So we said, hey, let's pull our resources together. And Bracket really started as business as a service, right? So we did all the marketing, HR, bookkeeping, all the stuff. We basically said, let us do the boring stuff, and you go out and do everything that you meant to do, painter or remodeler, any of that stuff. You're good at that stuff. We'll run the business for you. So in 2010, we shelved it all because both of us, again, majority of our money came out of real estate. And for me, I went back into supply chain and operations. Now, go back to what I said earlier in regards to I learned every aspect of the business because I started at the very bottom of my dad's company. So in 2010, I became basically a supply chain recovery expert. So what would happen was I worked in aerospace, and if a supplier wasn't meeting the needs of the program, they would send me in and say, figure out what's going on, get them turned around so they can support our program. So I did that for 4 years, which was crazy because, again, I tapped into everything I learned back when I was 16, 17, 18, because I learned all the aspects of what are the inputs and outputs of the business. From a sales side, it's driving the demand. On the purchasing side, it's driving the supply. Then all that feeds into operational execution. So all that was great, which then led me into business strategy. So one of the suppliers to that company I was working for said, hey, you're pretty good at this turnaround stuff. I need to sell my company. And I am like 70% all in on one customer. My on-time delivery sucks. I realize that I can't do anything. I can't sell the business as is. And I need you to come in and help me turn this company around, which was that was the next step to me starting the strategic journey of turn around and grow. And so then from 2015 on, it's just been a steady recurrence of companies was starting to hire me to turn the business around and grow. And then that basically turned into me rebranding Bracket into finance and ops turnaround and growth. And that's where I am today.
That's a great segue to, would you mind explaining for the audience what exactly is a fractional CFO?
Yeah, so a fractional CFO, in my case, I specialize in manufacturing, but again, most fractional CFOs are finding some specific area that they operate in. But for me, it's for businesses that have reached a growth plateau, is businesses that have actually potentially gone backwards, or in many cases, it's just the business owner says, you know what, the business is outgrowing me and I just need somebody to come in and help me. So for me, it's, I'm a seasoned executive that they hire me on a fractional basis, and it can be by the hour or retainer. And so you get a seasoned finance operations expert to come in and help you run your business on a fraction of the cost.
Now, can you talk a little bit about, you said that most of your clients are in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
So are they mostly based in the United States or Canada, or like where are the majority of your clients?
Yeah, so for Bracket, one of the things we try to do is we try to go on site, right? So we try to go shoulder to shoulder, be on the shop floor. So for me, all of my clients are in North and South Carolina. Again, that's my approach. There are a lot of fractional CFOs out there who really just kind of run your books, and they can be 100% virtual, right? Some people label themselves as a virtual CFO. But for me, since I am somewhat of the bridge between finance and operations, I like to go on site to understand exactly what's going on in their business. And therefore, I kind of keep it regional.
Do you see a common problem amongst people who need your services of like something that like high level that in order for them to be in that position have done wrong?
Yeah. Primarily, it's the owners of the business are traditionally the technical experts. They just don't really know much about business. And so what's happened is they've reached a plateau. They've reached a limit of their comfort level, and they started regressing back into the weeds. And they lose sight of the direction of the business because they're like, I'm tapped out. Something must be wrong here. And they tend to dive back into the details, into the weeds, versus taking it to the next level and really starting to focus forward. And so that's one of the very first things. When they call me, I go through all their financials and all this, that, and the other. But the very first thing I do is, how can we start driving your business forward? You got to stop looking only in the rearview mirror, look out of the windshield and drive forward. But again, their comfort level is in the technical side because technically that's why they started the business in the beginning, right? So that is traditionally the number one problem that I see.
How much overlap is there between problems like marketing and problems between actual processes?
The majority of my clients is all process based, and actually the majority of them don't even do marketing. So things that just naturally they've got them to a point naturally because they're good at whatever they're doing. But part of so we kind of have these 6 key areas that we kind of look at and work on. And one of the third area that we talk about is the sales funnel. And in there, we start talking about marketing. But we say you can't really do much from a growth standpoint unless your business is healthy. And it's traditionally all because they have little to no process in anything that they do. They just kind of do. And so we try to work very diligently to get processes put in place, because the worst thing you can do is grow an unhealthy business, because it will, I promise you, will rescind right back into where it was at. So yeah, it's predominantly process driven from my experience. And then we go into the marketing side of things.
What criteria would you have for determining whether or not a business was healthy other than profit?
Yeah, so we really look at 3 areas, and I've developed an assessment. It's about 100 questions. We look at strategy, we look at operations, and we look at, obviously, financials. Each one of them has about 33 to 34 points that we look at. So the strategic stuff, we just look at things in regards to what are you doing in regards to how you communicate externally and how do you communicate internally. Do you do strategic planning at all? When's the last time you've done a SWOT analysis? How does your backlog look in regards to how's your backlog in regards to how are you shipping? So it's a lot of things like that. Look at the operational side of things. We tap a little bit into the communication side, but a lot of it is driven directly from the KPIs. What's your on-time delivery? What's your overtime rate? What's your head count? Is it fluctuating with your sales? And again, it's a lot of stuff. How's your gross margin looking year over year? Is your material cost up, direct labor cost down? Any of those things. So all of it's very numbers driven. And then in the financial side, it's a deep analysis in regards to all the key ratios in regards to quick ratio, cash ratio, what's your debt to equity, how's your working capital looking over a 3-year time frame. And it's just, again, it's all that stuff. What's your DSO, or day sales outstanding, versus your DPOs, or your payables? Are they off centered? And it's all really metric based on that stuff. And so you get a grade. And so you get a grade for each section, and then in each section it breaks down in 3 other sections, and you can pinpoint 100% this is your weakest part of your business. And that's traditionally the first thing we attempt to prop up in order to make the company healthy.
Do you have clients coming to you just as a one-off thing, like fix my business, tell me what to do, and then go forward? Or is it more of a recurring maintenance thing?
Yes, retainer, and it is recurring. So I do have one group that is kind of a consultancy in regards to just go in and kind of fix it and leave. So it's very project based, but I try to position myself as a member of the management team. And so that becomes a reliance on, I need Stuart because of, he's my CFO, or he's my right-hand man, so for me, it's a very much of a long-term relationship, and I make myself a part of the business just like any other employee would.
If you can't share it, then it's okay. I know, because you're in a certain geographic area, but I'm just curious, what kind of manufacturing is it? What are these products?
Yeah, so it varies. Machine shops are some. I have a custom cabinet maker that does cabinets and trim work and cabinets installation. I have a designer, which is not necessarily manufacturing. And then I have a cell phone tower installation company, and they sell time very similar to a machine shop. And so even though they're 2 different industries, the parallels of selling time is identical. So it transfers pretty easily.
Wow, that's really neat. So what would you say is the most rewarding part of the business for you personally?
Yeah, so it's seeing that turn in the aha moments. We go through these things with the business owners and leaders, and it's inevitably there's a point where they just sit back and go, I get it. Those I get it moments are the best. And from there, we really can grow and take off. And so that same assessment that we give before we ever start the relationship, we review that on a quarterly basis to make sure that those numbers are improving. And it's because a lot of stuff, I say, you really can't feel my presence instantly. It's like kind of a slow burn, because we're just kind of picking at stuff and growing and improving as we go. But then you look at a month over month and go, man, we've improved that by 5% a month, or that grew by 10%. You can see just the growth in the company, because again, these guys are in the weeds. And so they think, man, I'm not feeling it yet. But when you can show them month over month how much you're improving, man, that's fairly rewarding.
How integrated are you with their systems? For example, you said that when a client onboards to you, they have to answer 100 questions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you give them questionnaires at a certain time interval, or how do you check up on their progress?
So how our method works, if you were to contact me, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, give me 3 years of financials, cash flow, balance sheet, and P&L. And I don't want to have any conversation with you other than that. I'll do the analysis of your business. I'll let the numbers tell me the story, right? So then when we kind of qualify that, so when I do my first face-to-face, I go and say, okay, this is what your numbers tell me. So if they say, well, that's not right, then I say, okay, your numbers are not right, because the numbers tell the story. I've never really had that happen, because they're always like, my God, how did you pull that out of those numbers? Is what the response I normally get. So when they answer that question, and normally the very first day that we've made an agreement, everything is good. The first day, what we do is sit down right out of the box and we go through that assessment. And I more or less just ask questions, because if I were just to give them that, some of that stuff they don't have a clue what it even means, and so I have to explain it. So we go through that assessment, then they understand it. And now I'm so ingrained in the business, when we come to the end of the quarter, I just sit down and I just update that sheet based off of what I know has changed since I first started. And that's how it works. So then I give them a report, and I say, okay, this is your quarterly report that says what we have done, what we haven't done. These are the key areas we need to continue to focus on. And then again, you can just see it month over, or I guess quarter over quarter grow.
Do you see any trend with your clients wanting to use things like AI in order to help their bottom line? Or
We
not
talk
yet?
about it. Yeah, we talk about it. They joke. I use AI like crazy, and I get a lot of flack from a lot of them, because they're like, am I paying you or am I paying Chat GPT? Because I'll go and chat and just, I'll pop off stuff left and right. So I utilize it a lot. They talk to me about it, because obviously they're seeing me use it, but it's not necessarily something that's a part of our everyday conversation. Obviously they're in tune to it because everyone talks about it, but I'm not seeing many guys use it right now.
It's interesting that they say that to you, because at this point, AI is definitely not a replacement for a
Mhm.
professional. I mean, you can ask it questions and you can learn, but it's good to have somebody that has decades of experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I use it a lot, and that's exactly what I tell them. If you've never applied it, you can get all the information in the world, but if you've never applied it, it's just, you're just reading something off the screen, so you still have to have that guy who can understand it and say, okay, this is what we need to go do.
So, how do you create value in a company?
Yeah. So value generation for me is really three main areas. We look at our pricing strategies, we look at our cost management, and new business growth. Those are the three areas that have direct impact to the bottom line. So every dollar that you add in price, keeping your costs flat, goes directly to the bottom line. Every dollar you save, directly to the bottom line. But both those aspects, if you're not constantly growing your business, you're not going to have anything to add price to and take cost out of. And so that's the only three ways that I know that really generates value: pricing, cost management, and new business growth.
So, when you're looking at optimizing a business, do you what role do competitors play in that, both domestic and overseas? Like, do you do competitor analysis?
Yeah. Yeah. So we normally, what I normally try to do is it's like the first quarter, most of the time, is kind of steadying the business. All right, let's get everything in place and see where we're at. But by the end of the first quarter, we're going to sit down and do our first strategic offsite. Most of these guys have never done that. So in there, right out of the box, we do SWOT analysis, and we do that on an annual basis, and we're always trying to understand what's going on. And so, yes, most of these guys, again, since they are the tradesmen, they understand what's going on in the marketplace. They know who their competitors are, and we get good feedback. And so we utilize the SWOT, and we do quarterly offsite. And always the very first thing we do is do a SWOT analysis, and we obviously in there we talk about the competition.
Do you also advise them on like how many employees they have on their roster,
Oh
if
yeah,
they
so
need more or less?
yeah, so sales per employee is a metric that we track. It's a good judge of efficiency. And so we baseline the business off of that. And then a lot of times you'll see that I got to go hire this person. And I'll say, okay, are they going to bring in whatever, $270,000 worth of sales? Because if not, then what are they actually doing? And so um, a big chunk of it too is we put a bonus program in place, and we try to tie the bonus to efficiency. And so when you tie it to efficiency, normally you're tying it to some measure of, you have 300 hours to do on a weekly basis. This is your head count. Are you sure you need that person? And then we look at putting the right people in the right seat. So a lot of times that's, unfortunately, this guy's just not cut out for where the business is headed. We have to do something there. So I don't do any hiring or firing, but I do a lot of coaching in regards to, you should hire this person, you shouldn't. And unfortunately, that person has to go because they're not going to be a part of the long term strategy. So yeah, that's kind of where it starts and stops.
That bonus incentive sounds awesome. I'm sure there's a lot of employees that thanked you for that suggestion.
Yeah, yeah. It's again the goal is to try to have all employees act as an owner, right? And so by the time you get all, so that's like our play number 5. So when you get 1 through 4 complete, the business is pretty healthy at that point, and then you really have to focus on posturing your employees to act as owners. Again, you get all that in place, and you can really go through the value generation piece.
So, what size are the businesses that you generally work with?
2 million to 40 million at the current. My current clients kind of fit in that realm.
And now, circling back to one of the first things that you had said, the client who was trying to sell their business, but they had to make big changes. Did they end up being able to sell their business?
They did. Yep. So
That's
they
great.
sold the business. The funny thing is, they thought that the one customer represented 70% of their business. But the reality was it represented 98%. They just didn't have a clue. Yeah. And the bad thing on that too is that customer was starting to pull work out. And they thought, well, if I lose half that, I'll lose 35% of my business. What they didn't realize is if they would have lost half that, they were going to lose 50% of the business. And so it was a scramble. We had they were going for the big wins. They were trying to get, it was an aerospace company. So they were trying to get other large programs. And what was funny was I'd sit there every day. It was a machine shop, and I'd see these quotes come in, and they have 3 pieces. And I'd see 5 or 6 of these quotes a day come in, or 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. And I was like, why are you not quoting this stuff? And he's like, it's just 3 or 4 pieces. I said, yeah, but nobody wants to do that. If we can set up we call it a blue streak a hot shot line where you had one person quoting, that same person programmed and machined the part, you can charge a premium because everybody ignores it, just like you've been doing. And so we developed a process where we had the one guy, he quoted it, he bought the material, he programmed it, he ran it, and we added 10% to the top line in sales just by focusing on the small things and not trying to go all in on the big stuff. And so that strategy allowed us to buy some time to ultimately win a bigger program, properly to diversify and then sell the business.
Wow. How big is your team?
So right now it's just me. Yeah.
So you bring all this, I was going to say, you bring all this experience from like years of you working with different businesses. And then it's so fascinating how you evolved to this business.
Yeah. We're close to hiring our first employee. So my wife helps some. And so we're at this point, I'm at the point where I'm going to have to bring on a new hire in the next month or so, because I've pretty much reached my capacity. So I've done a bunch of time studies over the last quarter to understand where all my time's going, because I am somewhat that finance and ops guy. So I got to figure out, who's the best person I can delegate some work to. And so we're in the process of making that change.
I think that it's so important for any business to know when that right time is to hire employee number 1, because if you hire too quickly when you could have done the work yourself, then you could sink yourself.
Yeah.
Do you see that, what do you think is a bigger problem? Companies hiring too fast or too slow? Because too slow is also a problem, because then you get buried in work and you can't get anything done.
It really depends on the size of the company. So I find that the smaller the company, the slower the hire. The bigger the company, the faster the hire. That's where I'm at today with some of my guys. And so it really varies. I have a small machine shop who I had to, the owner was doing everything. He was doing the programming. He was running the machines. He was also doing all the sales. And he slowly started to see his sales go backwards. And I'm like, dude, you got to focus on the sales side. We got to find somebody that you can delegate the day-to-day to. And it took 5 or 6 weeks to try to get him every day saying, dude, you got to do something about this. He finally just accepted it and hired the guy. And now it's like, oh, I get it. Okay, now I see. I was like, look, he's going to be an investment. He's a production manager. You're not going to see necessarily a return on your dollars, but you're going to see that your time's going to free up to allow you to grow to the top line. So you got to make that change. And so he was very slow. The other guys, I'm like, y'all got to stop hiring. They're going bananas. Our sales are up. We got to do this, got to do that. I've always wanted to. And I'm like, slow down, So the size of the company and also the size of the profit that I see dictates how fast or slow they're going to hire somebody.
I think that goes back to your penny story, because the idea of when things are good, you don't think of saving every little bit. but you have to plan for, because any business, there's always ups and downs. So you have to plan for those downs for
That's
sure.
right. And again, if I'm trying to drive a business, I say you got to drive your business forward, looking out of the windshield, which means all the decisions you make have got to be disciplined and with intent. There's no based off of this, I'm going to do this. No, plan today what you're going to do tomorrow and then execute accordingly. And to get people to think that way is difficult because most of the time the guys haven't. They just look back and go, oh, I've got X amount of money in my checking account. My AR looks good. Okay, we're good. My backlog's healthy. That's all I need. And it's like, no, you got to look forward. And again, we put that stuff in place. So you start looking forward and make the decision day. I'm going to hire somebody in 4 months and this is when we're going to do the pay and so on and so forth. So it's a change for them, but it works out.
That concept that you shared about the idea of making the employees feel that they are also owners of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expound on like how you thought of this concept?
Yeah. So it goes back to, again, some of my turnaround stuff that I've done in the past. A lot of times the frontline employees really have no clue much about business or anything or why things are being done. Or a lot of times you're saying, all the guys in office are making all the money, or look at the owner's boat, so on and so forth. And so what I started to realize is the more you would pour into the frontline employees, the more they knew. All of a sudden you saw your efficiency goes up. You saw your cost management go up because they started to understand how what they did impacted the top line of the bottom line of the business. And so what I worked to deal with, I said, listen, if we meet our profit targets, you get a bonus. If we don't meet our profit targets, you don't get a bonus. And oh, by the way, this is how you help us hit our profit targets. And then I started just seeing that, again, attitudes changed, turnover reduced. We started hitting our goals. Our on-time delivery was improving. I didn't have to yell and scream as much as I once did. And things just were better. And I thought, holy crap, this is working. And so, I stole the term act as an owner, right, from Dave Ramsey. He says it all the time. The Great Game of Business talks about it. And so I just started to recognize that's actually what I was doing without knowing it, is I was just getting the employees from frontline all the way to the management team to understand what was going on in the business, how everything they did contributed to the business. And if the business won, we would obviously turn around and reward them. And it made for a better situation.
That's awesome. So just two more questions. So the first one is, where do you see your business growing like over the next year?
Yeah. So, it's just, I'm continuing to get calls, right? I think the fractional CFO stuff is starting to become a little more known. You start to see now fractional CMOs, outsourced COOs. So there's a lot more people going out and doing the stuff. And so now it's starting to become more known. I'm getting more calls, right? And so I just see it continuing to scale. You hear me talk a lot about the place. We were talking about that. I keep kind of dropping that. So we got a whole framework around the business growth. And so we're looking at partnering with like EOS, entrepreneurial operating system. We're looking at potentially partnering with other fractional executives to say, hey, we kind of have an entire playbook. And so if you're a virtual CFO, you're kind of looking for a business system or business operations, then we'd like to potentially partner with you. And so we're kind of finishing that framework and that playbook up. And then so we're looking at potentially starting to market, not necessarily the business owners, but to the other fractional executives and a partnership and say, hey, we can kind of fill in some of the gaps that as a virtual CFO or, whatever the case may be that you might be missing, we can kind of fill in that gap. So I have a business coach and we're working through that playbook and trying to finalize that and hopefully have that thing launched in the next 3 to 4 months.
That's awesome. And my last question is, how will people get in contact with you? Like, what's the best way for people to contact you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on LinkedIn. I'm kind of all over all the social stuff, but LinkedIn's the primary venue that I'm most active on. And then you can check out my website at bracketmgmt.com, just bracket management, bracketmgmt.com.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Stuart. This was amazing information. And I hope that the audience gets a lot out of it, and that maybe if someone is in your area and, a potential client, that they would contact you.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate it. I'd love to have a conversation.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.